The morning sun cast long shadows across downtown Atlanta as Marcus Thompson finished his overnight shift at Mercy General Hospital, his weathered hands still steady despite the exhaustion that came with 12 hours of treating everything from car accidents to heart attacks. As a former Army medic turned emergency room technician, he had seen his share of chaos, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to unfold when the emergency radio crackled to life at 6:47 a.m. with reports of violent attacks spreading like wildfire across the city. Marcus paused in his paperwork, listening intently as dispatch described victims with severe bite wounds and attackers who seemed impervious to pain, their voices growing increasingly frantic with each transmission. Meanwhile, Rebecca Martinez was preparing her lesson plans for her advanced biology class at Roosevelt High School, her coffee growing cold as emergency alerts began buzzing on her phone with confusing and contradictory messages about rabid animals, mass hysteria, and warnings to avoid contact with infected individuals. As a science teacher with a sharp analytical mind, Rebecca immediately began processing the information, but nothing formed a coherent pattern that made sense until she saw the live news footage of people attacking others with their bare hands, the victims transforming within minutes into something that defied everything she knew about human biology. In his dormitory across town, Jake Williams was cramming for his final engineering exam when his roommate burst through the door, pale and shaking, pointing to the laptop screen showing a news reporter whose camera shook violently as he described scenes of unprecedented violence erupting across multiple city blocks. The footage showed people moving with jerky, unnatural gaits, their eyes vacant and milky white, pursuing terrified civilians through streets littered with abandoned cars and scattered belongings. At St. Mary's Medical Center, Elena Rodriguez was starting her morning rounds when the first wave of attack victims arrived, their injuries unlike anything she had encountered in her 8 years as a trauma nurse, with bite marks that seemed to pulse with infection and victims who displayed symptoms that defied medical explanation. Some patients who had been calm and coherent moments before suddenly became violent and aggressive, requiring restraints and immediate isolation as they snapped at anyone who came near them with teeth stained red with blood. David Park was monitoring the security cameras at Westfield Shopping Center when he noticed unusual activity in the parking lot, groups of people moving erratically and stumbling into cars and each other in what he initially assumed was some kind of flash mob or publicity stunt. However, as he watched more closely through the high-definition monitors, he realized these individuals were attacking anyone who came near them, their movements predatory and relentless despite obvious injuries that should have incapacitated them. His military-style training kicked in as he reached for his radio to call for backup, but the response he received was chaos itself, with multiple units already overwhelmed by similar incidents across the city. Dr. Amy Foster was treating a German Shepherd at her veterinary clinic when the dog's owner mentioned the strange behavior spreading through neighborhood pets, with several dogs and cats going missing overnight and those that returned seeming different, more aggressive and unpredictable than ever before. Amy had noticed similar changes in animals brought to her clinic over the past week, attributing it to stress or environmental factors, but now a chilling pattern was emerging that connected animal behavior to the human crisis unfolding outside. As the morning progressed, these isolated incidents began connecting into a terrifying pattern that emergency services were completely unprepared to handle, with hospitals filling beyond capacity with bite victims who quickly turned violent and police officers facing attackers who continued advancing despite gunshot wounds that should have been instantly fatal. The National Guard was called in, but communication systems began failing as cell towers went down and power grids fluctuated under the strain of a city in complete chaos. Marcus was among the first to recognize the true nature of the crisis when a patient he had personally treated for bite wounds suddenly attacked Dr. Harrison, displaying superhuman strength and an apparent immunity to pain that violated every principle of human physiology. The victim's eyes had turned completely milky white, and their behavior was purely predatory, driven by an insatiable hunger that seemed focused entirely on living flesh. As chaos erupted throughout the hospital with staff and patients fleeing in terror, Marcus gathered medical supplies and began formulating an escape plan while Rebecca received an emergency evacuation notice for her school just as she witnessed a maintenance worker who had been bitten earlier that morning transform and pursue terrified students through the hallways with relentless determination. The 6 future survivors would soon find their paths converging as the city descended into complete pandemonium, with military checkpoints being overrun by waves of infected, evacuation routes blocked by abandoned vehicles and roaming undead, and the government's emergency broadcast system repeating the same ominous message that offered little hope: seek immediate shelter. Avoid contact with infected individuals. Help is coming. But as the hours passed and the situation continued deteriorating, it became increasingly clear that help might not arrive in time, and survival would depend entirely on their ability to adapt, cooperate, and overcome an enemy that defied all conventional understanding of life and death. Chat Controls Sonnet 4. 3 days after the outbreak began, Marcus Thompson found himself crouched behind the overturned pharmacy counter at Miller's drugstore, his medical bag clutched tightly as he listened to the shuffling footsteps of infected wandering the aisles outside. The antibiotics and pain medication he desperately needed were just 20 feet away, but getting there meant risking exposure to at least 4 zombies who had shambled into the store during the night. His water supply had run dangerously low, and the infected bite on his forearm from his escape from the hospital was showing early signs of infection that had nothing to do with the zombie plague. As he calculated his odds of reaching the medication aisle, the sound of breaking glass from the back entrance made him freeze, followed by hushed voices that were unmistakably human and very much alive. Rebecca Martinez pressed herself against the cold brick wall of the pharmacy's rear entrance, her improvised spear made from a broken mop handle and kitchen knife trembling slightly in her grip as she whispered urgent instructions to Jake Williams, who was struggling to pick the lock on the employee door with tools salvaged from his dormitory's maintenance closet. Behind them, Elena Rodriguez kept watch while David Park stood ready with a crowbar, and Amy Foster clutched a backpack filled with medical supplies she had managed to grab from her veterinary clinic before it was overrun. The group had found each other purely by accident when Rebecca and Jake had stumbled upon Elena defending a family from infected outside the medical center, and their combined effort to save the civilians had forged an immediate but fragile bond of trust that had grown stronger over the past 48 hours of shared survival. The lock finally gave way with a soft click, and Jake carefully pushed the door open, revealing the darkened interior of the pharmacy where shadows moved in ways that suggested they weren't alone. Elena's medical training kicked in as she recognized the signs of human breathing patterns distinct from the labored wheezing of the infected, and she made the split-second decision to call out softly, "If there's someone alive in there, we're not infected and we're looking for medical supplies." The response came immediately as Marcus emerged from behind the counter, his hands raised but ready to fight, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the group's weapons, body language, and most importantly, their level of infection. "Former Army medic," he said quietly, nodding toward his medical bag, "and unless I'm mistaken you're a nurse?" he added, looking directly at Elena who wore scrubs stained with 3 days of survival. The initial tension dissolved rapidly as the group realized their complementary skills created opportunities that none of them possessed alone, with Marcus's medical expertise combining perfectly with Elena's nursing knowledge while Rebecca's scientific understanding of the infection provided crucial insights into zombie behavior patterns they had all observed but couldn't explain. Jake's engineering background proved invaluable as he quickly assessed the pharmacy's structural weaknesses and suggested improvements to their defensive position, while David's security experience helped them establish watch rotations and escape routes that maximized their chances of early warning. Amy's veterinary knowledge became unexpectedly crucial when she explained how the infection seemed to affect animals differently, providing early warning systems as pets often detected approaching zombie hordes long before humans noticed the danger. Working together with quiet efficiency, they systematically cleared the pharmacy of 3 infected customers and 1 former employee, learning their first hard lessons about zombie elimination while discovering that headshots were indeed the most reliable method of stopping the undead permanently. The process was grim and emotionally draining, but it solidified their understanding that survival required them to overcome their natural reluctance to destroy what had once been human beings driven by nothing more than an insatiable hunger for living flesh. Rebecca's analysis of the infection's progression through observation of fresh victims revealed that the transformation took approximately 6 to 8 minutes from initial bite to complete zombification, giving them a crucial time window for treating bite victims if they could find the right medical intervention. As night fell, they established their first real safe house by barricading the pharmacy's windows and doors while creating a comfortable living space in the climate-controlled prescription area where they could plan their next moves. Elena and Marcus worked together to treat everyone's minor injuries while Amy shared her observations about animal behavior that could help them predict zombie movements, and David organized their weapons and supplies with military precision. Rebecca used her teaching skills to ensure everyone understood the infection's scientific implications while Jake began sketching plans for fortifying their position and creating escape routes through the building's roof access. The 6 strangers had become a cohesive unit bound by necessity and mutual respect, but they all knew that their current sanctuary was temporary at best, as the growing sounds of infected gathering outside suggested that their presence had been detected and their first real test as a unified group was rapidly approaching with the dawn. Chat controls Sonnet 4. The morning of their fourth day together brought an ominous silence that made David Park's military instincts scream warnings as he peered through the reinforced pharmacy window at the empty street that had been crawling with scattered infected just hours before. Amy Foster noticed it first when the neighborhood dogs stopped barking entirely, followed by an unnatural stillness that even the pigeons seemed to sense as they abandoned their usual perches on the power lines and fire escapes. Rebecca Martinez was conducting her daily analysis of zombie behavior patterns when she observed something that chilled her to the bone. The random, aimless wandering of individual infected had been replaced by purposeful movement in a single direction, as if they were being drawn by some invisible force that defied everything she thought she understood about their primitive brain functions. Marcus Thompson was inventorying their medical supplies when Elena Rodriguez burst into the prescription area with news that would change everything. She had spotted what appeared to be hundreds of infected gathering 6 blocks north, moving together in a coordinated mass that suggested either evolved intelligence or some kind of hive mind behavior that none of them had encountered before. Jake Williams immediately began reinforcing their barricades with additional furniture and steel shelving while David organized their weapons cache, which consisted of 3 pistols with limited ammunition, several improvised spears, 2 crowbars, a baseball bat, and Amy's veterinary tranquilizer gun that had proven surprisingly effective at slowing down infected long enough for headshots. The group's cohesion was tested as different survival philosophies emerged under pressure. Marcus advocated for immediate evacuation while they still had mobility. Elena insisted they needed more time to prepare medical supplies for inevitable injuries. Rebecca wanted to study the horde's behavior to understand their coordination. David pushed for defensive positions that maximized their tactical advantages. Jake focused on structural improvements to their fortress, and Amy worried about the psychological trauma of prolonged combat on their group dynamics. Their debate was cut short when the first wave of infected appeared at the end of their street, moving with the relentless persistence of a natural disaster, their collective moaning creating a sound like distant thunder that grew steadily louder as more zombies joined the advancing mass. The horde numbered in the hundreds, filling the street from sidewalk to sidewalk as they shambled forward with single-minded determination. Their milky eyes focused on the pharmacy as if they could sense the living humans hidden inside despite the heavy barricades and boarded windows. Marcus positioned himself at the front entrance with Elena, both armed with pistols and backup melee weapons, while Rebecca and Jake took the rear exit and Amy joined David at the side windows where they had created firing ports between the wooden boards. The first infected reached their defenses at 2:47 p.m., and the sound of rotting fists pounding against reinforced doors and windows created a rhythm like a macabre drumbeat that seemed to drive the zombies into even greater frenzy. David's security experience proved invaluable as he called out tactical instructions, coordinating their defensive fire to maximize ammunition efficiency while Jake's engineering modifications to their barricades held firm against the initial assault. The battle raged for 3 hours as waves of infected threw themselves against the pharmacy's defenses, with Marcus and Elena working in perfect synchronization to eliminate zombies that broke through the front barricade while Rebecca used her scientific knowledge to target the horde's apparent leaders, disrupting their coordination patterns. Amy's veterinary expertise became crucial when she identified bite victims among the attacking zombies who were still partially human, allowing the group to focus their limited ammunition on the most dangerous threats while using tranquilizers to slow down recently turned infected. Jake's improvised explosives, created from pharmacy chemicals and his engineering knowledge, proved devastatingly effective at thinning the horde's numbers, but the cost was high as their ammunition dwindled and exhaustion began taking its toll on everyone's accuracy and reaction times. The turning point came when David noticed that the infected were beginning to lose coordination as the sun set, their hive mind behavior breaking down without some external stimulus that seemed to require daylight to function properly. Rebecca's quick thinking led to the discovery that loud noises could redirect the horde's attention, and Jake rigged a car alarm 3 blocks away that drew most of the remaining zombies away from their position. However, their victory came at a terrible price when Elena was bitten during the final assault while helping Marcus barricade a breach in their defenses, the infection spreading rapidly up her arm despite immediate medical intervention. The group faced their first impossible decision as Elena's condition deteriorated rapidly, her skin growing pale and her eyes beginning to cloud over while she begged them to end her suffering before she could turn and threaten the people she had fought so hard to protect. Marcus's steady hands trembled as he prepared the final injection while the others said their goodbyes to a woman who had become both friend and sister in just 4 days, learning the harsh lesson that survival sometimes demanded sacrifices that would haunt them forever. and that their enemy was not just the zombies outside, but also the constant threat of losing their humanity in the fight to stay alive. Chat controls Sonnet 4. The acrid smoke from the pharmacy's smoldering remains still stung their eyes as the 5 surviving members of their group descended into the Atlanta metro system through a maintenance entrance that Jake Williams had discovered during his frantic search for escape routes, their hearts heavy with grief over Elena's sacrifice and the knowledge that their safe house was now nothing more than charred rubble and broken dreams. Marcus Thompson carried Elena's medical bag alongside his own, determined to honor her memory by continuing the healing work she had started, while Rebecca Martinez clutched the scientific notes Elena had helped her compile about zombie behavior patterns, knowing that this information could mean the difference between life and death for other survivors they might encounter. The subway tunnels stretched endlessly in both directions, their emergency lighting casting eerie shadows that danced and flickered like ghosts, creating an underground maze where every sound echoed ominously and every shadow could hide either salvation or death. David Park took point with his military training guiding their formation through the abandoned tunnels, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness to reveal evidence of hasty evacuations, scattered belongings, overturned vending machines, and ominous dark stains on the concrete that told stories of desperate last stands and failed escapes. Amy Foster stayed close to the group center, her veterinary bag containing precious antibiotics and sedatives that had become more valuable than gold in their new reality, while she watched for signs of animal life that might indicate safe passages or warn them of approaching danger. The tunnels provided blessed relief from the surface chaos, but they also presented new challenges as their voices echoed in ways that could attract unwanted attention, and the maze-like layout made navigation treacherous for anyone unfamiliar with the system's complex network of maintenance corridors, abandoned stations, and emergency exits. Their first encounter with other survivors came at the abandoned Peachtree Station, where they discovered a group of 12 people led by a former transit authority supervisor named Robert Hayes, who had intimate knowledge of the tunnel system and had successfully guided his group through 2 weeks of underground survival. The meeting began with mutual suspicion and drawn weapons, but Marcus's medical expertise quickly proved invaluable when he treated a young boy's infected wound that Hayes's group had been unable to properly address, while Rebecca's scientific knowledge about zombie behavior patterns provided crucial insights that had kept Hayes's people alive but confused about the infected's hunting methods. Jake's engineering skills impressed the tunnel veterans when he identified structural weaknesses in their defensive positions and suggested improvements that would protect them from tunnel collapses, while David's tactical experience helped them organize more effective patrol schedules and watch rotations. However, the underground sanctuary proved to have its own deadly inhabitants when they encountered their first tunnel zombies, infected who had been trapped underground since the initial outbreak and had adapted to the darkness in disturbing ways, their other senses becoming heightened while their hunting instincts grew more sophisticated in the confined spaces. These tunnel zombies moved differently than their surface counterparts, using sound and scent to track prey with terrifying efficiency while navigating the darkness with an uncanny ability that suggested the infection might be evolving in response to environmental challenges. Amy's veterinary knowledge became crucial when she identified the presence of infected rats that served as early warning systems, their behavior changing dramatically whenever tunnel zombies were approaching, giving the survivors precious minutes to prepare defensive positions or escape routes. The alliance with Hayes's group provided valuable resources and local knowledge, but it also introduced dangerous complications when they discovered that another survivor group led by a man called Commander Price had established a militaristic colony deeper in the tunnel system and was forcibly recruiting survivors while eliminating anyone who refused to join his authoritarian regime. Hayes had been avoiding Price's territory for weeks, but their combined group size and skills made them an attractive target for forced recruitment, especially since Marcus's medical abilities and Jake's engineering expertise were exactly the kind of specialized knowledge that Price's group desperately needed to maintain their underground fortress. The tunnels that had seemed like salvation were becoming a complex political landscape where survival meant navigating not just zombie threats, but also human conflicts that could prove equally deadly. Rebecca's analysis of tunnel zombie behavior revealed that these adapted infected were developing pack hunting strategies, using the tunnel's acoustics to coordinate attacks in ways that surface zombies couldn't achieve, while their enhanced senses made them nearly impossible to surprise or evade in close-quarters combat. The group realized that their temporary safety in the tunnels was an illusion, as they faced threats from multiple directions. Tunnel zombies that had evolved beyond their understanding, Price's aggressive recruitment tactics that threatened their freedom, and the constant risk of structural collapse in aging infrastructure that was never designed to support long-term human habitation. As they pressed deeper into the tunnel system in search of a route to the surface that wouldn't lead them back into the devastated city, They carried Elena's memory with them like a beacon of hope, knowing that her sacrifice had taught them the true cost of survival and the importance of protecting not just their lives, but also their humanity in a world that seemed determined to strip away everything that made them human. Chat Control Sonnet 4. The morning sun streaming through the reinforced windows of Lincoln Elementary School felt like a blessing from heaven as Marcus Thompson, Rebecca Martinez, Jake Williams, David Park, and Amy Foster finally emerged from the suffocating darkness of the tunnel system into what appeared to be a thriving survivor community of nearly 60 people who had transformed the school into an impressive fortress complete with gardens, workshops, and medical facilities. Commander Price's recruitment attempts had forced them to flee deeper into the tunnels where they discovered an exit that led directly to the school's basement, and their arrival was greeted with genuine warmth by the community's leader, Dr. Catherine Walsh, a former CDC researcher whose scientific credentials and calm demeanor immediately impressed Rebecca, while her organized approach to survival resonated with David's military background. The school's transformation was remarkable. Classrooms had been converted into living quarters for families, the gymnasium served as a community meeting space and dining hall, the library had become a research center where survivors documented zombie behavior and experimentation results, and the cafeteria operated as a fully functional medical clinic where Amy's veterinary skills complemented the work of 2 human doctors and 3 nurses who had found refuge within the school's walls. Dr. Walsh personally welcomed their group with enthusiasm that seemed almost too good to be true, immediately recognizing Marcus's medical expertise and Rebecca's scientific background as valuable additions to their research efforts into understanding and potentially reversing the zombie infection. She gave them a comprehensive tour of the facilities, explaining how the community had successfully defended against multiple zombie attacks while developing innovative solutions for food production, water purification, and waste management that allowed them to operate as a completely self-sufficient settlement. The school's playground had been converted into agricultural plots where they grew vegetables and herbs, while the roof hosted solar panels and rain collection systems that Jake admired for their engineering sophistication, and the basement levels contained workshops where survivors manufactured weapons, tools, and medical supplies from scavenged materials. Dr. Walsh's research laboratory, located in the former chemistry classroom, contained an impressive array of scientific equipment salvaged from hospitals and universities, along with detailed documentation of experiments that she claimed were bringing them closer to understanding the infection's biological mechanisms. However, Rebecca's scientific training began detecting inconsistencies in Dr. Walsh's research methodology when she noticed that many of the documented experiments involved live subjects in ways that violated basic ethical principles, and her suspicions deepened when she discovered that the laboratory specimen storage contained what appeared to be infected tissue samples that were far too fresh to have been collected from naturally deceased zombies. Amy's veterinary background proved crucial when she identified bite marks on some of the community's children that had been explained away as accidents but showed patterns consistent with deliberate exposure to infected saliva, while Marcus's medical expertise raised serious concerns about the unusually high number of community members who displayed early symptoms of infection but claimed to be participating in voluntary vaccination trials. David's security instincts were triggered when he noticed that certain areas of the school were off-limits to regular community members and were guarded by Dr. Walsh's inner circle of loyalists who carried themselves with the discipline of trained soldiers rather than desperate survivors. The horrible truth was revealed when Jake accidentally discovered a hidden basement level beneath the main laboratory where Dr. Walsh was conducting systematic experiments on captured zombies and unwilling human subjects, including several children who had been deliberately infected to study the progression of the disease in young immune systems. The laboratory contained detailed records of Dr. Walsh's research into creating more intelligent and controllable zombies through genetic manipulation and chemical enhancement, with the ultimate goal of developing a hybrid human-zombie super-soldier that could be used to establish her authority over other survivor communities. Rebecca's analysis of the research data revealed that Dr. Walsh had been the lead researcher on the original project that created the zombie outbreak, and her current experiments were attempts to perfect the weapon that had already destroyed civilization rather than find a cure to save humanity. When Marcus confronted Dr. Walsh with evidence of her crimes against humanity, she revealed that her armed guards had been monitoring their group since their arrival and that they now faced a choice between joining her research program as willing subjects or being forcibly converted into test specimens for her latest experiments. The community that had seemed like salvation transformed into a nightmare prison as Dr. Walsh's true loyalists revealed their weapons and began hurting the innocent survivors who had believed in her false promises of safety and hope. The 5 friends found themselves fighting not just for their own lives but for the lives of dozens of innocent people who had trusted Dr. Walsh's lies, including families with young children who faced unspeakable horrors if they couldn't escape the school that had become a laboratory of evil. Their battle for freedom would test every skill they had learned during their journey while forcing them to confront the terrifying reality that sometimes the greatest monsters in their new world still wore human faces and spoke with voices of authority and scientific respectability, making their escape from Lincoln Elementary School a desperate race against time before they became unwilling participants in experiments that would strip away their humanity forever. Chat controls Sonnet 4. The desperate fight to escape Lincoln Elementary School left them with 17 rescued survivors, including 3 families with young children, but their victory came at a devastating cost as David Park had been critically wounded during the final assault against Dr. Walsh's guards, and Marcus Thompson worked frantically to keep him stable while Rebecca Martinez guided their enlarged group through the abandoned streets toward the Chattahoochee River, where Jake Williams had spotted a collection of boats at a marina that might offer their only chance of reaching safety. Amy Foster helped carry the youngest children while maintaining watch for both pursuing guards from Walsh's compound and the increasing number of infected that seemed to be converging on their location, drawn by the sounds of gunfire and explosions that had marked their dramatic escape from the school-turned-laboratory. The marina appeared deserted at first glance, but Jake's engineering expertise quickly identified a 40-foot cabin cruiser that had enough fuel and mechanical integrity to carry their group across the river and potentially reach one of the small islands that dotted the waterway, offering the promise of natural barriers that might finally provide genuine sanctuary from both human and zombie threats. Loading 17 people onto a boat designed for pleasure cruising rather than refugee transport created logistical challenges that tested everyone's patience and resourcefulness, while David's deteriorating condition required Marcus to perform emergency surgery in the boat's cramped cabin using veterinary supplies from Amy's bag and improvised instruments that Jake fashioned from marine equipment. Rebecca coordinated the evacuation with scientific precision, ensuring that families stayed together while maximizing their defensive capabilities, and her analysis of wind patterns and current flows helped Jake plot a course toward Rabbit Island, a small uninhabited landmass approximately 3 miles downstream that appeared to offer natural protection and potential resources for establishing a long-term settlement. The journey down the river revealed the true scope of the catastrophe as they passed burning cities, abandoned military checkpoints, and bridges crowded with infected who had fallen into the water but continued their relentless pursuit even while submerged, creating underwater hazards that forced Jake to navigate carefully through seemingly safe channels that might conceal deadly surprises. Rabbit Island initially appeared to be everything they had hoped for. Roughly 2 square miles of forested land with freshwater springs, natural caves that could provide shelter, and dense vegetation that would offer both concealment and resources for survival, while the surrounding water created a moat that seemed impossible for zombies to cross without boats or swimming abilities that the infected had never demonstrated. The group worked together to establish their new settlement with renewed hope, using lessons learned from their previous experiences to create better defenses, more efficient resource distribution, and improved medical facilities where Marcus could properly treat David's injuries and monitor the health of their entire community. Amy's veterinary knowledge proved invaluable for assessing the island's wildlife and identifying safe food sources, while Rebecca's scientific approach helped them establish sustainable practices for water purification, waste management, and food production that could support their growing population indefinitely. However, their paradise began revealing sinister secrets when Amy discovered the skeletal remains of previous inhabitants scattered throughout the island's interior, and her forensic analysis suggested that these people had died violently rather than from natural causes or zombie attacks, with evidence of systematic execution and mass burial that predated the current outbreak by several months. Jake's exploration of the island's cave system uncovered disturbing artifacts including military equipment, scientific instruments, and documentation that suggested Rabbit Island had been used as a secret research facility where early experiments with biological weapons had been conducted on unwilling human subjects. Rebecca's investigation of the documents revealed that the island had been ground zero for prototype versions of the virus that eventually became the zombie plague, and that Dr. Walsh's research had been based on data collected from experiments conducted in the very caves where they were now seeking shelter. The island's dark history became an immediate threat when David's condition suddenly worsened in ways that didn't match his injury profile, and Marcus discovered that the island's water supply had been contaminated with trace amounts of experimental compounds that were causing accelerated infection symptoms in anyone with open wounds or compromised immune systems. Their sanctuary was slowly poisoning them while the infected on the mainland seemed to be developing new behaviors, gathering in massive numbers along the shoreline as if they were being drawn to the island by some invisible signal that the experimental compounds might be broadcasting. Amy's analysis of the local wildlife revealed that many of the island's animals showed signs of genetic mutation and behavioral changes that suggested ongoing exposure to biological agents, while Rebecca's testing of soil and water samples confirmed that the entire island was essentially a contaminated laboratory where deadly experiments continued even after their creators were long dead. The group faced their most impossible decision yet: remain on the poisoned island where they would slowly succumb to experimental contamination while being surrounded by growing hordes of infected, or attempt a dangerous return to the mainland where Dr. Walsh's forces were still hunting them and zombie populations had grown exponentially during their absence, carrying with them the knowledge that nowhere in their devastated world was truly safe from the consequences of humanity's darkest scientific ambitions and the terrible price of playing God with forces beyond their understanding or control. Chat Control Sonnet 4. The decision to leave Rabbit Island came when David Park's condition stabilized enough for travel after Marcus Thompson discovered that the experimental contamination responded to a combination of Amy Foster's veterinary antibiotics and specific minerals found in the island's cave system, providing them with a potential treatment protocol that could help other survivors while giving them crucial intelligence about the original research program's antidote development. Rebecca Martinez's analysis of the recovered documents revealed the location of the primary research facility where the zombie virus had been originally developed. A heavily fortified underground complex called Project Genesis located beneath the CDC headquarters in Atlanta, where the scientists had been working on both biological weapons and their corresponding countermeasures before the outbreak escaped containment and destroyed civilization. Jake Williams used his engineering expertise to modify their boat's engine and armor plating with materials salvaged from the island's abandoned research station, creating a vessel capable of navigating the infected waterways while carrying their group of 17 survivors back toward the very heart of the catastrophe they had been fleeing. The journey upstream toward Atlanta revealed that the infection had evolved far beyond their worst nightmares, with massive zombie hordes now moving in coordinated patterns that suggested some form of collective intelligence, while new variants of infected displayed enhanced physical capabilities including improved speed, strength, and problem-solving abilities that made them exponentially more dangerous than the shambling masses they had encountered during the early days of the outbreak. Amy's veterinary knowledge proved crucial when they discovered that some infected animals had retained enough intelligence to serve as scouts and communication relays for the zombie hordes, creating a surveillance network that made stealth approach nearly impossible, while Rebecca's scientific analysis revealed that the virus was continuing to mutate in response to environmental pressures and host adaptation patterns. Marcus's medical expertise became essential when they rescued a group of military survivors from an overrun checkpoint, including Sergeant Lisa Chin, a biochemist who had been part of the original Project Genesis research team and possessed insider knowledge about the facility's layout, security systems, and most importantly, the location of the completed antiviral serum that could potentially reverse the infection in recently turned victims. Sergeant Chen's revelations transformed their understanding of the entire outbreak when she explained that Project Genesis had been deliberately sabotaged by Dr. Walsh and her collaborators who wanted to release the virus as a weapon for global population control, while the legitimate researchers had been working desperately to complete a cure before the containment breach occurred. The antiviral serum existed in limited quantities within the facility's secure vault, but accessing it required navigating through multiple levels of automated defenses, military-grade security systems, and an unknown number of infected that had been trapped inside the underground complex since the initial outbreak began. Chen's insider knowledge revealed that the facility contained not only the cure but also detailed records of everyone involved in the project, including government officials and corporate executives who had authorized the research and could potentially rebuild civilization if they survived long enough to establish new leadership structures. The approach to the CDC facility required them to navigate through the heart of Atlanta where massive zombie hordes had established what Rebecca could only describe as primitive settlements, with infected organizing themselves into hierarchical structures that suggested the virus was creating a new form of collective consciousness rather than simply destroying human intelligence. Jake's engineering skills were pushed to their limits as he designed diversionary explosives and electronic countermeasures that could disrupt the facility's automated systems, while Amy coordinated with their rescued military personnel to establish defensive positions that could protect their boat during their infiltration mission. Marcus worked tirelessly to prepare medical equipment and treatments for whatever they might encounter inside the facility, while Rebecca analyzed Chen's technical data to understand exactly how the antiviral serum worked and what resources they would need to mass-produce it for distribution to other survivor communities. The underground facility proved to be a technological nightmare where automated defense systems continued operating on emergency power, creating deadly obstacles that had to be overcome through a combination of Chen's access codes, Jake's technical expertise, and David's tactical knowledge despite his ongoing recovery from the island's contamination. They discovered that the facility housed not only the cure but also evidence of a global conspiracy involving multiple governments and corporations that had planned to use the zombie virus as a tool for reshaping world population and power structures according to their vision of controlled evolution. The vault containing the antiviral serum was protected by a final challenge that none of them had anticipated. A group of enhanced zombies that had been deliberately infected with an experimental superstrain of the virus, creating incredibly intelligent and physically powerful adversaries that retained human tactical thinking while possessing zombie resilience and aggression, forcing our heroes to fight for the cure against enemies that combined the worst aspects of both human evil and undead. Hunger in a battle that would determine not just their own survival, but the future of every remaining human being on Earth. Chat controls Sonnet 4. The battle against the enhanced zombies in the Project Genesis vault pushed every member of their group beyond their physical and emotional limits as Marcus Thompson found himself fighting creatures that retained enough human intelligence to use weapons and tactical thinking while possessing the relentless hunger and enhanced physical capabilities of the undead, forcing him to abandon everything he thought he knew about zombie behavior while desperately protecting the antiviral serum that represented humanity's last hope for survival. Rebecca Martinez used her scientific knowledge to identify weaknesses in the enhanced infected by analyzing their movement patterns and discovering that their hybrid nature created neurological conflicts that could be exploited through specific frequencies and light patterns that Jake Williams quickly engineered into makeshift weapons using the facility's emergency systems. Amy Foster's veterinary expertise proved crucial when she realized that the enhanced zombies still responded to certain pheromone triggers, allowing her to create diversions that split their attention while David Park, despite his ongoing recovery from contamination, coordinated their tactical assault with military precision that kept their group alive during the most dangerous fight of their entire journey. Sergeant Lisa Chen's sacrifice came when she deliberately exposed herself to the enhanced zombies to buy time for Jake to access the vault's final security protocols, her death serving as a stark reminder that even their victories came at terrible costs that honored Elena Rodriguez's memory and demonstrated the price that true heroes were willing to pay for the greater good of humanity's survival. The vault itself contained not only the antiviral serum but also comprehensive documentation of the global conspiracy, detailed manufacturing instructions for mass-producing the cure, and most importantly, a complete list of every research facility worldwide where additional supplies and equipment could be found, giving their small group the knowledge needed to potentially restore civilization rather than simply surviving day by day. However, their moment of triumph was shattered when they discovered that the facility's automated systems had been programmed to broadcast their location to every military installation and government bunker in North America, meaning that within hours they would face not only zombie hordes but also heavily armed forces representing the same corrupt officials who had authorized the original outbreak. The impossible choice that would define their legacy came when Marcus realized that they possessed enough antiviral serum to save themselves and their immediate group, but distributing it to other survivor communities would require them to split up and undertake incredibly dangerous missions to facilities across the continent where other survivors were desperately fighting for their lives. Rebecca's analysis of the serum's properties revealed that it worked most effectively within the first few weeks of infection, meaning that millions of recently turned zombies could potentially be saved and returned to human consciousness, but only if the cure could be distributed quickly and efficiently across vast distances while avoiding both zombie hordes and corrupt military forces. Amy's medical knowledge confirmed that the serum could also provide immunity to future infection, essentially creating a new generation of humans who could safely work to rebuild civilization without fear of the virus that had destroyed the old world. David's tactical assessment made it clear that their best chance of global distribution required them to sacrifice their own safety by splitting into separate teams that would carry the cure to different regions, knowing that some of them might not survive the journey but trusting that their sacrifice would honor everyone they had lost while giving humanity a real chance at recovery and redemption. Jake's engineering expertise proved essential as he developed portable manufacturing equipment that could produce additional serum supplies using resources available at other facilities, while Marcus prepared detailed medical protocols that would allow other survivors to safely administer the treatment even without professional medical training. The dawn of their final day together brought both hope and heartbreak as they realized that their journey as a unified group was ending, but their mission to save humanity was just beginning. Their farewell at the CDC facility marked not an ending but a transformation as Marcus headed north toward Canadian research facilities with half of their group, while Rebecca led the southern expedition toward laboratories in Florida and Texas, carrying with them not only the physical cure but also the spiritual legacy of everyone who had died to make this moment possible. Amy and David chose to remain at the Atlanta facility to coordinate communications and serve as a central hub for other survivor groups, while Jake embarked on the most dangerous mission of all, returning to the underground tunnel systems to distribute the cure among the communities they had encountered during their journey, including Robert Hayes's group and even the innocent survivors trapped under Commander Price's authoritarian rule. As they watched the sun rise over a world that had been consumed by darkness and death, they carried with them the knowledge that Elena Rodriguez's sacrifice had not been in vain, that Dr. Walsh's evil had been exposed and defeated, and that their choice to risk everything for strangers they might never meet represented the very best of human nature triumphing over the worst impulses that had created the zombie apocalypse in the first place, proving that even in humanity's darkest hour, hope could survive and flourish when ordinary people chose to become extraordinary heroes. Chat Control Sonnet 4.